Hi there, fellow sea glass lovers. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm Jackie, and in today's video I'm going to give you 10 design tips for designing a rather large sea glass mosaic. I just finished this sea glass mosaic, but I started it last summer. I was using it as a demo for a workshop that I did last summer, and I've been kind of tied up and I just got it finished. So I just got my design tips finished. So join me for those 10 tips. And next week, because I finally got this finished, I'm going to post a video to show you pictures from the workshop and give you a chance to see what everyone was working on. It was so much fun. So 10 tips for designing a large sea glass mosaic. So the first tip I would give you when you're designing a sea glass mosaic on a large vintage window is to find your inspiration. So my inspiration for this design is Van Gogh. I recently had the opportunity to go to the Van Gogh 360 show. If you ever have the chance to go, I'd highly recommend it. It's really inspirational. So my design for this mosaic is I'm trying to recapture some of those flowing lines, and there's just so much movement in a lot of Van Gogh's pieces. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll see a fair amount of movement. Lots of circles, lots of squares, some real structural shapes, and I'm really hoping to capture a bit of that Van Gogh-esque feeling. And a second design tip I would give you is to use some really special pieces. So this piece of glass is very large. It came from the beach. It's a white frosted piece of glass. So I want to put that in this large window. And you really can only get away with really large special pieces like that in a really large design. So it's a good place to incorporate those. And then I also have a large bottle bottom here that's brown. That's kind of a cool one. And I'm going to put that in there, and I've got a white circular bottle bottom and a bottle top kind of nestled in with it. And I've also got another green bottle bottom there. So using some of those really special pieces that are large really works well in a large design. A third tip I would give you is to break the rules. Now, I often say when it comes to sea glass mosaics, there are no rules, but one of the rules I set for myself is to only use pieces that come from the beach. Well, in this mosaic, I am including 2 pieces here that do not come from the beach. At the workshop that I was doing, one of the girls showed up with a whole bunch of pieces of broken glass from a serving plate that she had that broke. And they were so pretty. So I challenged all of the participants in the workshop to take a piece of this broken glass and incorporate it into their design. So in this design, I'm incorporating 2 pieces of this. It adds a little bit of color, it adds some interest, but obviously it hasn't come from the beach because there's no frosting and sea glass effect around the outside edges of the pieces. But I'm going to use them anyway just because it's interesting. A fourth design tip that I would give you is to search through your sea glass and look for squares and triangles and arrange them in a way that they kind of create flowing lines, and that way it can create a lot of movement through your piece. So if you see, I've got this long flowing line of green sea glass, and then here I've got another one that starts here and then goes through the middle of the piece. And as you can see, when you look at the whole piece, it creates a lot of movement in your sea glass design. A fifth design tip I would give you here is to glue some pieces of sea glass on top of other pieces of sea glass. So here, when I'm creating this flowing line of blue, I carried the line of blue right over that great big white piece of sea glass, and it adds some interest and it helps to break up that great big white sea glass piece quite a bit. Just makes life a little bit more interesting in your piece of art. A sixth design tip I would give you is to look for opportunities to create some contrast. So I have these circles. So I have like a number of circular pieces of sea glass and some more circles that I'm going to create. And I also have that contrasting with some square pieces of sea glass and square rocks and squarish rectangular type of pieces. So to me, you get contrast between the circles and the squares. And then I'm also contrasting some vertical type of lines, vertical straight lines, with some horizontal flowing lines. And to me, that creates a little bit of contrast as well. Just add some more interest to your design. So a seventh design tip that I would give you is to stand some of your sea glass pieces on end. So if you see here, I have a green circle and a white partial circle, and in both those circles I've stood a number of the sea glass pieces on end. And if you look at it from different angles, you can see it really has a lot more dimension to it, and it adds some interest. I find it quite fascinating to have some pieces like that. So the way I would do that, if you look at this white circle here, I would take some of my sea glass pieces. If you see here, I put the silicone on the bottom of it, and I just use my tweezers and stick that down like that. Now when you're doing a piece like this, you have to use a little bit of extra silicone because it doesn't hold as well, just because there's less of the sea glass piece touching the glass. And using the tweezers helps to get it in place, just so. And then it's a little bit more of a cleanup too. I have to use my tweezers to, or my little poker sticks to clean up some of the mess there. But once it sets, you don't see that white silicone, and it really adds a bit of interest. So design tip number 8 is to straddle the mullion. The mullions are these wooden boards that divide the panes of glass, and they really break up your design. So when you're doing your sea glass, it really is helpful to straddle that mullion, like to straddle the board. So you can see how I take the green line across this mullion and then again across this mullion, and then the green line down here comes across this mullion. The piece of driftwood that I have, I cut a piece right out of it right there so that it then ran up to the top part of the next pane. If you look at this circle here, I have a circular piece of glass here, another circular piece of glass here. It just kind of continues that design, even though they're two different types of glass. This one is white and this one is milk glass. And in this circle right here, the one that I did with the pieces of glass standing on end, I did part of it below the mullion and part of it above the mullion. And I'm also carrying little lines of brown up there, little lines of white down into the pane below it. So it really adds a lot to your design if you kind of carry on with your design right across the mullion. So my design tip number 9 is to use larger and darker pieces towards the bottom and smaller and lighter pieces towards the top. So that way, in your overall design, when you have a larger mosaic, it helps give more weight to the bottom of your piece, and then it gives you a better sense of balance. So the last design tip I would give you when you're creating a large sea glass mosaic is to create details so that you draw the viewer in, so they don't just stand back and look at it, but they go really close to see all those extra little details. Like here, you can see I've put sea glass on top of the other sea glass, added a piece of pottery there. I've added a few shells and rocks. All of these little details that draw someone in. And I have rocks with holes in it. All those things are going to be like, ooh, what's that? And there's 2 rocks on top of that piece of sea glass. Little shell there and an extra rock. So that the closer they look, the more they're going to see. Hopefully this gives you some ideas of how you can add some details to your pieces. Up there in the very top, I've added a little rock and a shell. Some cute little shells there in the middle. Put a flower on top of that brown piece. Another little piece of pottery there. Inside that round bottle top, there's a tiny little shell. Anything that draws your viewer to look closer really adds a lot to the detail in a large sea glass mosaic. So thanks so much for joining me for this video. I hope you found it really helpful and inspirational, and it gives you some good ideas for creating a large sea glass mosaic. Now, if you want some tips for designing a smaller sea glass mosaic, I'll give you a link to that video as well, because for the workshop last summer, I demoed a small project and a large project, and I did videos for both of them. So be sure to join me next week and see some pictures from the day of the workshop. It was so much fun. And until next time, I hope you make it out to the beach, and happy sea glass hunting.